Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar. On today's event, we will cover the leading trends in digital government services delivery for this year in Canada. I'm Nadia Davis. I lead public sector marketing here at PayIt, and I will help run today's event. So a couple months ago, PayIt ran a North American survey across thousands of residents and several hundreds of government agency respondents to better understand the resident sentiment and expectations around the digital government services delivery, how residents wanted those services delivered, what they expected, and where those expectations might have come up short, versus what the capabilities within the agencies across cities, counties, states, and provinces across the US and Canada were at the time. We wanted to better understand what the governments were struggling against, where they saw victories, and how they were planning to address the shortcomings that they discovered. And on today's event, we will present the state of the Canadian digital government services delivery for this year. So with that, let me welcome our Canadian panel, and I will turn that over to John Telch, who is VP of Canada here at PayIt. John, welcome to the program. Thank you for making time. Over to you.
Yes. Thank you so much for having us. I also want to introduce Julie Gagnon, who's joining us as a director from Strategy Core and who is herself a former chief administrative officer. Julie, thanks so much for making yourself available and sharing your insights. So for those that are unaware or haven't interacted with PayIt before, we enable provincial and local government agencies to deliver intuitive resident payment experiences that accelerate the channel shift to digital. Folks choose us to better achieve their mission through improved efficiencies, customer support, resident satisfaction, and of course, cost savings. And in the icons below, you'll see a snapshot of some of the core services that we provide to our partners across North America. But let me pause there for a start. And Julie, can you give us a bit of background on your time in government in Ontario, and as well as what you do now at Strategy Core as a director, and why municipalities might get in contact with you and engage your services to help with digital strategies and so on?
Sure. Thanks, John, and thanks for having me today. So my career in local government really spans about 20 years, and all 20 was working in senior level positions in both rural and urban municipalities. And my most recent municipal experience includes 6 years as CAO in an upper tier municipality. So I've been a director with Strategy Core for the past year or so, working in our management consulting practice. And I specialize in municipal services, surprise, but also in digital transformation. So at Strategy Core, we do a lot of broader strategy work for municipalities and different government agencies and entities. We also support a lot of broad spectrum digital transformation and modernization initiatives. So our work involves developing strategies and action plans for ongoing innovation and modernization that helps our clients address current state and identify ongoing improvement opportunities, look for ways to adapt to the ever evolving tech landscape in ways that ensure that their services are efficient, but also attuned to the communities they serve. We do a lot of implementation work, which sees us guiding those teams, those government teams, through tech adoption, through process optimization, and supporting the nuances of change management. And that helps them with seamless transition and ensuring minimal disruption. We co-design strategies with our clients to make sure that their strategies really resonate with the organization and the community's ambitions, and take a hands-on and consultative approach to doing that. So at the end of the day, we find that a lot of our clients do struggle to find a path forward for digital adoption, but they tend to have a common focus. So they're looking for solutions like a PayIt, where digital tools offer modernized platforms around the customer experience. So in terms of outcomes, it's really multifaceted, from achieving significant efficiencies and gains and cost reductions through streamlined operations and automations, to really elevating and enhancing public service delivery through user-centric digital platforms.
Perfect. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I can't wait to get into more of the questions as we go. So the big question that we wanted to answer from conducting the survey and the study here was the first wave of digital government service delivery is well underway, but what comes next? And what we really mean by that is that there really is a push in municipalities and provinces all over Canada to enhance service delivery, and that often means digital. And it doesn't mean, we always want to make the clarification that it's never digital only. It's digital first, but not digital only. And the things that digital can help you do is shorten lines at places like City Hall, where folks are lining up to pay bills or parking tickets or renew permits, whatever it happens to be, or alleviate staff capacity so that rather than mailing out a tax bill, you have an employee who is now positioned to do something of greater value to service delivery inside the government. And Julie, over your time as a CAO and now in your current role, how dramatic has this shift to digital been?
Oh, it's been dramatic, and we're seeing that it's to my earlier point, it's ever evolving. So it's changing, with every quarter, I would say, where community expectations are changing. The more users are getting quick access to services in their personal lives, the more they are expecting that within their government services as well. And so the pressure is really on municipalities and government agencies to adapt at an accelerated pace.
Couldn't agree more. So just a quick snapshot of the study, and for those that are joining us, you're going to get a copy of the slides if you haven't already. So you're encouraged to take voracious notes, but you don't have to because you'll get all of this afterwards. But just wanted to show a breakdown of who responded to the study, who was engaged, and I think the breakdown of ages is really interesting because we really have managed to get insights from sort of every age bracket of the population who's going to be interacting with a government digital service, whether it's, as I mentioned, a parking ticket, maybe it's renewing a hunting license, maybe it's something for their vehicle renewal. Um, and just a little bit about the study, a further breakdown for you. We had 611 respondents at the provincial level or in a local government line of business or IT leadership position across North America. And when we say line of business leader, we mean that could be an IT leader, that could be your tax manager, that could be your CAO, your CFO, whoever it happens to be. Maybe one of the deputies over in technology at the municipality. So that just gives you a little bit of that breakdown. And just a pause here. What is government customer experience? And of course, we're looking at that lens digitally today, but we at PayIt, and I know that Julie and her team do this as well. And from myself, I'm a former political staffer. So, while Julie has the brains coming from the administrative side, and I have the looks because I was a political staffer. That's the joke I always tell to differentiate. But we always look holistically at user experience in government. So, everything we do digitally is going to have this knock-on effect to shortening lines, as I mentioned, or maybe cutting down the use or reliance on paper products, which in this study you'll see later on was really important to Canadian respondents, that going digital actually helps my government cut down on mailers and other paper products. And I'm for that. I'm very for that. So when we talk about government customer experience, especially through the lens of the survey, we're thinking about any interaction between a resident and a government agency where they can find information, access a service, pay a bill, renewals, again, any licensing, that can be a government service as well. These experiences can be good or bad, just like any customer experience in the private sector. But the good ones are a difference maker for residents and for the like-minded government agency. And just like everywhere else, as Julie mentioned, digital is now a dominant part of the government customer experience. So I'm going to pause and put Julie on the spot again, which might be a recurring theme today. But Julie, leaning on both of our past experiences in our past lives, you find yourself in the CAO chair, and all of a sudden you get a very excited knock on your door from the excitable mayor's chief of staff, who happens to be me, who basically breaks the door down and says, "Okay, Julie, we got to stop what we're doing. We have a new priority. Council and the mayor and residents are really pushing us that we need to have a better customer experience in the municipality. And the mayor campaigned on this, and we have to deliver something, and budget season is coming up." And I've just thrown all of this information at you, and you're in the CAO's chair, and my question is, where do you even start?
I suspect this wouldn't be the only initiative and the only time you'd be knocking on the door. But if I was back in the CIO's chair and facing, this type of demand, I think it starts with a needs assessment to validate it. So I'd want to understand the specific online services or digital services that are most in demand and where that feedback is coming from. So is it that residents don't want to have to come to the office in person to pay a tax bill? Are they looking for quicker and easier interaction with municipal services? So I'd use that information to look for ways to find efficiencies while improving that end user's experience. So I think you have to consider the current people and processes and technologies that are in place in order to, pave the way for digital adoption. And this includes identifying whether there's money to support it. So from my perspective, I also think it's critically important to engage with stakeholders who've shared their demands and to do so early on. So you want those insights to ensure that the digital transformation aligns with their expectations and needs, and you're not just basing this on assumption. So it's that data that was always the cornerstone of my strategy. And I think data is so powerful in making informed decisions and helping with prioritization. Gives you the chance to tailor the services to really meet the needs of the user. But to really get to your question, in order to advance this mandate or this strategy, I would look for opportunities to find some low-hanging fruit or some quick wins that are pretty straightforward, relatively easy to implement, and adopt those digital tools to demonstrate value and build momentum for some larger initiatives. And that would give me a chance to start small, do some monitoring, gather some data, and adjust the approach. But at the end of the day, my goal was always to extend beyond introducing new technology or meeting the needs or demands of a councillor or the mayor or the chief of staff, but instead to include fostering a culture of continuous improvement and innovation as I go.
That's amazing. And if I could drill down into it a little bit more, if we imagine that we're in these positions today, and there are pressures like Bill 23, which has limited opportunities for enhanced revenue for municipalities, or post COVID budget constraints. How much of a motivator is savings in that sort of needs assessment that you're putting forward and that you're going to present to your team and say, okay, guys, we got to generate buy-in here, and this is really important to the town or the city, whatever it happens to be?
Yeah, so I think it's part of the balanced approach. So you want to meet customer expectations, but you also have to balance the balance sheet at the end of the day. So I think finding efficiencies and finding opportunities to recover costs associated with the new digital platform or service are critically important at the same time as you're assessing how this is going to alleviate pressure on the team who is probably already feeling at capacity. So I think it's right up there in terms of meeting customer expectations and taking a reasonable and measured approach to providing government services, which is something that public servants are tasked with doing every single day.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, there's so many things. There's so many considerations here. I mean, there's technology that you can adopt that could be great, but could have a huge price tag beside it. There are net neutral costs. There are no cost options. There are low cost options, and the balance of that. The win lives here. And that win is different for residents, for the political folks, for the public service, but it makes it possible to really row in the same direction. And we find, in our work at PayIt, we find a lot of the best work happens there when there is a legitimate problem to solve. And I say problem with a lowercase p. It's nothing is on fire. No one's done a bad job previously, but there is a drive for better citizen service. There is a drive to give residents more of a choice in how they want to interact with their government and have that experience of ordering groceries online or using Amazon be replicated in all aspects of their lives. And just so fascinating to hear how it, how it would happen from the CAO's chair, and that thinking of, where is the win, where is the low hanging fruit, but is this worth it, and is this the way to get a result? So that was really interesting to hear. I'm going to keep moving here. So, one of the pieces of major feedback that we got in this study was asking, residents or consumers, um, how they would respond by having a good online experience with paying a government bill, as an example. And I think this is such an interesting slide because when I worked in politics, we had what we called the happy folder and the sad folder. And the sad folder, unfortunately, was always a lot thicker by weight of paper than the happy folder, and that was emails that we got from constituents about certain things. And by and large, most of the time it was things that we didn't really have control over. Maybe they were at another level of government, but we got kind of dinged for them anyways. But that happy folder piece of paper, that email that you may have printed off and put in the folder, was really, really special. And sometimes they came from unexpected places. We don't expect someone to be over the moon because we ask them to pay their property tax bill. I don't get a great feeling of gratification for paying a parking ticket. But if the experience is easy and just allows me to get on with my life, then I'm much more likely to enjoy it, and think positively of the agency that's behind it. And so I thought it was really interesting that in the feedback, we got 71% of respondents say that if they had a good experience, they would absolutely recommend it to others. The increase of trust of the government agency would go up, which I'm sure, Julie, you and I have lots of experience of being in government and trying to push that trust meter way, way up. Or in the case of a political staffer, trying to get my boss reelected for keeping promises. And I mean, if I was in a government agency or a political office and someone wrote something positive about me on social media, I might have to retire on the spot. I think it would be, such a huge accomplishment. And just as an anecdote, I'm a resident of Toronto, and I of course use my Toronto Pay services for property tax and utilities, and the odd parking ticket I may or may not receive. But a friend of mine texted me the other day and saying, "I'm really mad at PayIt," and I said, "Why? What did we do?" And he said, "You made it really easy for me to pay my parking ticket." And I get compared to the old experience, I can't believe how seamless it was. And fortunately for us, he just bought his first house, so he'll be a property tax user as well. But it was just, he wasn't happy he had to pay a parking ticket, but he said, "I got to just move on with my life, be compliant, and it was a great experience. I've created a profile, stored my information, and off I go." And this was positive. I appreciate the government doing this. So difference makers for agencies. Um, I think some of these are not surprising, but I think they're so important. We found that the most important outcomes, for the agencies that we surveyed were, of course, save money, and that of course comes more from a CFO perspective than, say, maybe a CIO, but maybe you're both thinking about that, and that's wonderful. But improves resident satisfaction and trust being at the top, I think, is so important. And I'm always very pleased to see that, because I think if we all lose sight of that goal, then we probably shouldn't be doing what we're doing. It's really about service for the citizen, and you'll see later on in the slides how PayIt views that, and I'm sure how CAOs like Julie would view that. Collect revenue faster and provide easier customer support, of course, should be up there. I mean, Julie, these things really resonate with I think what you just said. So if you have any further comments, I would love to hear them.
I think they definitely align with kind of what municipalities are looking for when implementing. So, saving money, improving satisfaction, being able to report back to council that, we've been able to expedite repayment for, tax collection, or, the number of residents who, were, I'm losing the word, but not non-compliant, but what we're in arrears, that has improved because, they don't have to come to the office anymore, and being able to share those metrics, and show council and your team that you're enhancing customer satisfaction is going to establish stronger trust in government, and it's going to flow over and spill into other areas of service that you're providing as well. So big wins and big differences for government agencies.
Yeah, that's so well said. I mean, we find, and our partners find, that really citizens, they want to be compliant. Again, I use the parking ticket example. I'm not going to be happy if I get a parking ticket, but what do I really want to do with that ticket? I want to pay it, and then I want to just get on with the rest of my life. I don't want to have to wait, 4 weeks for it to go online just to provide my Visa, Visa card at bad 90s web experience. I just want to pull it up on my phone, scan the QR code. Yep, done, great. Or know that when it's property tax season, several times in the year, that my money is going to just be withdrawn because I've signed up for an auto enrollment that's run by my city government, and I just have the confidence that I'm going to be in compliance, and I'm not going to get that envelope in the mail saying I haven't been compliant, because I want to be compliant. I want to do these things and make sure I'm paying my bills on time. So I think that's a really great segue into the next slide, and this is something that we encounter a lot in terms of helping to solve a problem in a particular municipality or provinces. There's a lot of really amazing work that happens in local government trying to make the transition from no digital experience to some digital experience, or something that they've tried to create in-house, but there can be problems. And we at PayIt have a lot of perspective as to why that might be. A lot of, unfortunately, limitations for government, and looking at these percentages of issues like technical glitches or multiple click-throughs to get to the one thing you're trying to do, or an unclear process. When you're doing this needs assessment in the CAO's chair, or you're working with your municipality client, Julie, how do you navigate the sort of the build versus buy debate? And how do you prioritize that? And again, of course, we're thinking about savings and we're thinking of operational efficiencies. I'd love your perspective on that.
That's an interesting question, and I think it really comes down to having to have a strategic mindset and being objective. But it involves not just understanding the immediate needs and objectives, but considering things like scalability and flexibility and future integration capabilities. So, a key factor in making the decision to build in-house versus buy is assessing that total cost of ownership for both options. So that includes looking beyond initial development or purchase costs and considers things like ongoing maintenance, updates, and support over the service's lifespan. So these are things that I think are easily overlooked when developing things in-house in particular. Another big factor that we can't lose sight of is the actual time it takes to deploy. So off-the-shelf solutions that can be customized often offer a quicker rollout, which is beneficial if there's a more urgent need for the solution. So if the mayor or the chief of staff is banging on your door, it's top priority for council, maybe a top priority for the community. So, that deployment time is critically important. And I think it's also important to consider the degree or the extent of customization that's required. So if an available product meets most of the requirements and can be easily adapted, adopting it, in my experience, was often the more prudent choice when considering the resources required to build and maintain and support a platform. But a critical question I'd ask clients now in my role as director is, do you have the expertise and the bandwidth to develop and maintain this custom solution? And if you have an analyst who can build this, what happens if they're no longer with the municipality? Because, there is a constant churn of staff through municipal government. So, if you say no to any of those questions, then purchasing a solution with strong vendor support is likely more viable. So the last thing I'd mention is I think it is important to consider the impact of end users and stakeholders. And this is something you've probably caught on to that I reinforce constantly, but I suggest, it's those folks who will be engaged early in the process to really share their preferences and their requirements, which can also guide your informed build versus buy decision.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. I mean, we have a lot of conversations where the question actually gets put to us by a municipality or a province of, what would you recommend? And this is what we're considering. And that's not to say that having a visionary is not important, because it really is. You need to have someone who is inside the government, whether it's provincial or municipal, who says, my vision for resident services, my vision for customer experience is X, Y, and Z, and this is what I need to achieve. Because the reality is while we're experts at what we do, you are experts in your own government and your own constituency. And, if we're ever going to partner together, that's expertise that we're going to absolutely rely on to make sure that whatever we might develop for you is going to have the look and feel of the experience that you want. That being said, part of the what I take a lot of pride in of what makes PayIt so special is that we've really drilled into a lot of the key themes that you mentioned, Julie, in that for those that don't know, our typical model is to be a no cost to government platform. We tend to launch in about 60 to 90 days, and we become part of the government, digital tapestry, if you want to call it that. So if you go to My Toronto Pay, you are part of Toronto.ca. You don't leave that experience. You aren't taken to some third party, sort of sketchy entity, which I think is special. And coupled with that is as a no cost to government option, we only succeed together if we're executing your vision in the right way. If we are serving your residents in the right way, can we be successful? And the other piece of it too is that you alluded to is, what is the true cost of building something? And unfortunately, there are upgrade costs, there are security costs, there are PCI compliance costs, and if a partner is working with PayIt, they don't eat those costs. That's on us to constantly keep updating and innovating and protecting and being secure so that you get to go out and deliver your mandate and we get to support you doing that. So of course, if that's of any interest to anyone attending, we'll happily, please send us an email. We'll happily keep the conversation going. But this build versus buy debate, I think is so important, especially in this climate of things like I mentioned before. In Ontario, we have Bill 23. In other provinces, we have other financial restraints. And I think you raise a great point. If you're in a 100,000 municipality and you lose the analyst who's building your platform 2 weeks before launch, I mean, the impacts could be real. You could be delayed quite a bit. There could be other subscriptions you need to provide. I mean, it really could be quite devastating. So I really appreciate your insights there, Julie. All right. So when looking at the 2.0 version of government customer experience, we asked in this study, what percentage of payments currently are you collecting digitally or as a resident do you use in your daily life, and what percentage of payments would you prefer to be digital in the next 2 years? And I think these graphs tell a great story of this is where we're moving to. This is where we've already moved to, I think, kind of as a society, and government in certain areas is trying to catch up. In other places, government is trying to be the leader in digital adoption, which I think is a really noble endeavor. And this really, I think, prescribes where we're going. And it's been such a change from, if you are someone who for your role or of interest has to ever listen to a provincial budget or a state of the city address or a fiscal update, a speech from the throne, digital services are now part of that conversation. And 5 years ago they were not, but now it's an imperative that digital adoption is really linked to things like election platforms or government delivery, regardless of what level of government you're at, which I think is quite fascinating. So the impact of more digital adoption, how might digital customer experience and payments shift more payments online? We call this channel shift, creating more adoption. Some really interesting findings here, but it leads me to a question for you, Julie, which is, the wins that exist by moving something digital, by pushing for that government channel shift, by that resident channel shift, are different, for every stakeholder. They're different for residents. They're different for the mayor and his or her team. They're different for council and their teams. They're different for the CFO and the CIO. And how do you, in the CAO's role, or in your consulting role, how do you navigate that, and how do you ensure that the right advocacy is done so that it's clear that there's something here for all of us and it's worth doing for all of us?
So if we just looked at the survey data, I think there's there's a lot of information that if municipalities were able to kind of assess the new tool or innovative aspect of their service against these types of measures, that would be great. But there are some huge wins here when it comes to public perception and response times and availability. So to ensure that those are deeply felt internally and across the organization and even externally with your community, I think it's critical to involve those stakeholders right from the outset. Um, it also involves communicating clearly and frequently about the goals. So you will have established those goals at the outset, but keep communicating those goals and then track your progress against those goals and share the successes of that digital transformation. And this to me means celebrating milestones and successes, no matter how big or small, just to keep that momentum going and keep morale high. I also think there is a cool way to engage members of council and other stakeholders in the planning and implementation phases. So, you can have them test a platform. They can provide feedback on functionality. This will give them a sense of ownership over the projects and really help align their personal and professional goals with the broader objectives of the digital service improvements. And that'll help support buy-in and at the end of the day, they might celebrate a little bit more because they've been part of the process. So I find it's important to be able to demonstrate direct benefits of digital adoption. So through the data that you're collecting, and also providing real life examples. So testimonials of residents who have said, this is amazing. And here are the reasons why I think it's amazing. Hearing from your staff and being able to report that back to your council members to say, this has led to more efficient workflows, reduced our manual tasks, and resolved some paper-based processes. And this has, above all, enabled more meaningful engagement with our residents. So helping, craft stories that really celebrate the successes is critically important. And then finally, I'd say the big win here for council and city staff when you're sharing information about digital adoption is that by sharing the wins, you are fostering a culture of continuous improvement and really inspiring innovation. And that is going to be catching across the organization. So the cultural shift ensures that the wins from digital transformation are seen not just as one-time victories, but really as stepping stones towards an ongoing journey of improvement.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think it's really important, having been in government and now, spending the majority of my career around government, but not actually in, but is celebrating the victories, I think, is underdone. Because there's so many, like, you're in public service and there's so many competing interests after your time and your resources and your capacity. But I think it's so important to look at those metrics of, of course, the low hanging fruit ones are we saved X many millions of dollars, but to look at how, like, look at this service, we served this many residents faster, or, a metric that we're very proud of, our partners are very proud of, is the drop in support needs, which is, PayIt is the first line of defense, if you want to call it, in customer support. And the questions are very simple from, I just want to make sure I have this information right. Can you clarify? Of course. And those simple questions, being almost the only questions, make sure that the city staff who typically handles, 311 complaints or whatever department it might be, they don't have to do that as much anymore. And now they get to focus on other things. And that's a victory, because that means satisfied constituents. And that's really what we're all after, is folks able to enjoy the services that we're all striving to provide. I would love to ask as well, because we think about this a lot, is, when we're working with partners to make these big adoption pushes, is, how do you make sure that you don't leave anyone behind, from an accessibility standpoint? Like, how would a municipality think about that? Of, okay, well, we have, folks who may not, they might be a small percentage, but they might not want to utilize technology, or maybe someone is visual and hearing impaired. Like, how do we make sure that they're not feeling left out of what we're doing or left behind by what we're doing?
I think municipalities have a good sense, or they have their finger on the pulse of the accessibility and inclusivity groups that exist within their communities. Often there's a committee of council that supports accessibility, and so engaging committees, engaging stakeholders. The point I've been kind of weaving into all of my answers is to identify even champions at all of those kind of special groups, even those who are reluctant to adopt technology, find a way to engage them, use them as folks who will pilot the new initiative. That'll help garner buy-in, but it'll also help inform the solution that you're trying to put in place by making sure it does meet everyone's needs. And so finding those representatives is likely something municipalities can do as long as they're reminded to do so. And it doesn't come up after the fact, post implementation, that, oops, we forgot. So I'm glad you mentioned that, John. That's critically important, is to make sure no one is left behind when it comes to transforming the way a service is delivered, because municipalities exist to deliver services to the community. So you want to make sure as many people's needs as possible are met.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree. It couldn't be more important, and we take it very seriously as well. In that, of course, if we're going to partner with a government, we are leaning on them to express to us what all of their needs are, especially when it comes to accessibility, and ensuring that we don't just meet, say, the provincial standard for the Ontarians with Disability Act. We go beyond that, and we can provide voice, voice capabilities for those that are visually impaired, or dictated text, or whatever it might happen to be. But it's just so important. And, I say that as someone who's been in the policy making room politically, and it can be, believe it or not, it can just be so easy when you're in that room to forget things like that, not deliberately, but again, because your capacity is limited and you're looking for a positive narrative and you're looking for something quick. And it's so important to take that step back and say, we have to make sure that everyone is along for this ride. Everyone is along for this journey. So I really appreciate your comments there. Just a few more slides to get to, and then I promise you won't have to hear my monotone voice too much longer, and we can get to the Q&A. So the path to 2.0 customer experience assumes a few critical things, which we've kind of talked about. Assumes government interactions are digital first, or are transitioning to digital first, because every government is on their own separate journey. It's designed around the customer experience and not necessarily an internal government process. It doesn't mean that it can't benefit that internal government process, and it should. And built to drive measurable outcomes for agencies and the residents they serve. And Julie, you and I have talked about this quite a bit already, of where are the wins, and what narratives are we looking to tell here, and what victories are we looking for? Is it a number of people served? Is it better collection rates? Is it more revenue in? Is it less customer support requirements? So those things are always very, very important. And we look at this as well, and from the survey results of called the virtuous cycle. So people try digital services that just work, which is so true. That requires fewer support interactions, fewer manual processes. There's that push I talked about of less mail. That was something that came through the responses, and Nadia talked in the intro about there are differences between the US and Canada responses, and the Canadian responses. Citizens were much more likely to look at digital service as a means of being better for the environment, which I think is in a sense is really wonderful, but also it's also not surprising. That is it says a lot about Canadian policy making and policy thinking about what are the knock-on benefits of doing something like this. And there's that environmental push, but also has a cost-saving aspect as well. Of course, we've discussed about money arriving faster, services are funded faster, and the residents and government both benefit. Moving on here, this is a slide I want to spend a bit of time on: how to champion customer experience in your organization. So, Julie, the question I have for you on this slide, I think relevant in your past role and your current role, is, the municipality has decided, or the province has decided, that this digital transformation push around, let's say, 3 services, let's say bill collection, license renewal, and one other, permitting, let's say, is really important. And as the CAO, you're managing too many priorities to assign yourself to be the champion of this. How do you find that champion within your organization? How do you ensure that they are able themselves to, they're empowered to generate buy-in from other agencies? So maybe it's the CFO that you're empowering and they need to get the buy-in of the CIO or vice versa. How do you navigate that?
That's a very good question. And I think to your point where, as CAO, you're too busy to champion this yourself. That said, you're not too busy to support a champion within the organization. And I often found the champions, they they identified themselves as champions and may even have been an originator or like the person who came forward with this notion of the idea in the first place. So I always felt internal champions for digital transformation in particular was vital. And not just for spearheading the initiative, but for maintaining a balance among various other organizational and competing priorities. So they helped keep things top of mind, but essentially they served as a linchpin for digital initiatives, driving that enthusiasm and establishing commitment and inspiring other champions within the organization and across other departments. So they helped make sure digital transformation was a strategic priority and helped others see that alignment within disparate service areas. So a critical role. And to your other point or your other question, which was, how do you empower this champion or what do they need in order to be successful? I think it's really important to recognize that they have to have the necessary authority and they have to have some resources. So sometimes this just means granting them access to senior management, to securing budget allocations for them for digital projects, to helping facilitate cross-departmental collaborations. And those are all functions that the CAO can do to help position the champion for success. But also, and above all, their role should be recognized and respected across the organization. So as the CAO, you can make it clear that they have the respect and support and backing of top leadership, which really helps position them within departments, but even within organizations outside of the municipality that may interface with the service change. So balancing the push for better digital experience with other priorities does require a strategic approach and direction from the CAO. So I'd support that champion in developing some sort of digital roadmap. And this is an area where, I currently, in my role as director in digital services, I help clients develop those digital roadmaps, which ensure the digital path or digital strategy aligns with the organizational objectives. And it's practical and can be implemented. But essentially, within the municipality, the champion needs to be empowered to engage with other departments, to engage with frontline staff, which we can't lose sight of. And that's going to help identify any potential conflicts of priorities very early on and understand the impact across the organization, which really helps support a holistic approach to project management and change management. So lastly, I know I'm kind of rambling on here, John. I'm excited about this one, but measuring and sharing the outcomes of digital initiatives is something I'll reinforce again because I think it applies. Demonstrating tangible benefits not only justifies the investment, but it motivates the organization. And these are all things that the champion can use to kind of spread enthusiasm across the organization and show how everyone is contributing to the collective success. So to kind of wrap it up, as CAO, empowering the internal champion and balancing digital transformation efforts and aligning other priorities involves strategic alignment, resource allocation, and doing your part to foster a culture of communication and collaboration.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such a great response, and I think it, there's also that really important moment where if you are the IT manager, you're the CIO, and your CAO taps you on the shoulder and says, "I want you to to take all this prioritization and come up with a digital roadmap, and I'm going to support you. And likewise, the revenue services manager or the revenue services director gets a tap on their shoulder that, this is going to make your job easier, and we want you to collaborate in the process. And how is it going to work on the back end with the vendor or however that is? I think those interactions are so important to empower people to feel like not only do I get to make this really substantive and important and impactful policy change, but someone's got my back too, which is, I think so important. So just to transition to the last few slides, we're going to talk about all of these themes in Toronto quickly, so that we save time for Q&A. So at PayIt, we have something called human-centered design and problem solving. I call this the bicycle wheel because I don't know what else to call it until someone gives me a better name. And at the center of the bicycle wheel and everything that we do and everything that we strive to do is the user, is the end user, is the citizen, the constituent, and everything that we do to make what we do so special is based around them in collaboration with our partners. So of course, we're going to deliver that vision that Julie and I were just talking about. We want to empathize with the user. What do they need to be successful in using this to make it easy? We're going to define the problems that exist, the issues the user had previously, make sure that we get over them. We are going to ideate. We're going to do prototype and testing and constant improvements, which you're going to see a little bit of in a moment, as well as going to the user and seeking their feedback. Because of course we need that feedback in order to create something that they're going to want to use and enjoy using. So with that, I mentioned that we work with the City of Toronto as one of our many clients across North America, and their residents had some initial customer service experience demands and needs. I want a secure identity, I want to make a payment, I want to have a profile, I want it to be easy to use, very similar to how you might interact with other things online. All my municipal services that are important to me in one place. And if you look at the quotations at the bottom, I want it to notify me, remember me, engage me when it needs to engage me, make it about me, not about what's trying to be done here, hear me, support me, etc. Just a quick snapshot of our Toronto implementation. So now we find ourselves in 2024 with launched pre-authorized payments for property tax as well as utility, which are amazing. I mentioned it as a user myself. I get to go into my profile. I click that I'm signing up for pre-authorized, and I know that I'm going to be in compliant and not get that letter in the mail from the city saying, John, you haven't paid your property tax in 3 sessions now. We have a serious problem. And we've also introduced things like e-billing. We have the parking journey as well. And Toronto has just been this amazing partner. There's some brilliant people working at the city, and they've just been wonderful to collaborate with, and just to have the vision of bringing this forward has been wonderful to partner with them. The outcomes speak for themselves. I mean, if you look at where we were at launch to where we are now, once people get things like email campaigns and personalized dashboards and get introduced to new services, they really take off. And we've had just an exceptional year-over-year growth across the services. We have over 1.3 million users and growing. And again, I can't reiterate just how wonderful a partner they've been. And that brings us to my final question for Julie, which is about residents. So from that testing piece of the bike wheel that I mentioned, is we go to residents and we say, what do you like about this, and what do you not like? How can we improve it? And my favorite response here was from a 76-year-old who said, I don't understand tech, but I got this. It was easy. Thank you. Like that's if I was back in my political office, I would have taken this, printed it, put it on the wall in a frame, maybe, and then sent it to everyone I knew. But that leads me to the question, Julie, of should we consult residents when we're trying to do these things, and is it worth it?
I think you might already know my answer, but I will elaborate on this to say that when it comes to community engagement, you're asking me about something I firmly believe in, and robust stakeholder and community engagement is something that also differentiates Strategy Core from some of the other consulting firms. So absolutely, consulting residents about improving services is something we think is not only worthwhile, but essential. Engaging with the community can provide valuable insights into, what is it that they need. What are their preferences? What are their concerns? And this will help ensure that services are truly aligned with what matters most to those who municipalities are serving. So it fosters a sense of ownership, which I've mentioned previously, and helps establish partnership between the municipality and its citizens, which enhances trust and builds stronger community ties. So I think it does lead to more efficient and effective service delivery, because understanding their expectations and the challenges that they face with the current way services are delivered can help the municipality prioritize improvements, because the municipalities have a ton on the go. And so how do you pick what's most important? So how do you innovate effectively? How do you avoid the pitfall in investing in solutions that don't fully address the community's needs? Because we all know if our community or residents' needs are not met, they do tell us. So this feedback loop can end up saving significant resources in the long run by ensuring projects are done right the first time, and making sure that there's mechanisms put in place so that these services can adapt to changing user needs as over time. So involving residents in the conversation helps democratize the decision-making process. It acknowledges that the residents and the communities and the end users that you're serving are not just recipients, but they're active participants in shaping what they're receiving through services. That can, in and of itself, lead to increased civic engagement and a more engaged citizenry who's willing to support and adopt future digital services that are put in place. So I would just finish by saying consulting with the community or stakeholders about service improvements isn't just worthwhile, but it is fundamental to creating more responsive, effective, and trusted government services. So it embodies a government that listens, that adapts, and serves its communities with the residents' best interests at heart. And I know, having looked at, dozens and dozens of strategic plans and helped municipalities develop those, I know that those are key prerogatives of many municipal councils across the province. So it is important to council to engage with the community, but I think it's equally as important for administration and the staff to find out what they need to deliver on in this digital service.